Well, hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining our webinar, Helping Teens Manage Depression, Practical Skills That Work. I'm Susan Weinstein. I'm Executive Director at Families for Depression Awareness. And I'll just talk for a few minutes, do some housekeeping as we wait for people to settle in. So we are, of course, recording this webinar, and we will post it on our website and our YouTube channel, which is FFDA1, the number one, shortly. We'll be sending the link so that you all can view the webinar on demand. It'll go to everyone who registered for the program. And even if you're here for the live webinar, you may want to rewatch some parts. And we also want to make it easy for you to share it with others who might benefit from watching. So watch for that within the next 24 hours. With regard to Zoom, we invite you to use both the chat and the Q&A. Use the Q&A to direct questions to me and Dr. Mezulis, and use the chat to share ideas and insights with your fellow attendees. Ari, a Families for Depression Awareness staff member, will be feeding things into the chat, some links and some information. So keep the chat open if you can, and if you can't, then just check it occasionally and scroll back up. Feel free to, say where you're coming from in the chat, and make it lively. So thank you so much to the folks who submitted questions with their registration. We've combed through and we'll ask as many as we can. Happily, many of them will be answered during the course of the presentation. So we know we're on the right track with what you're looking for. So we welcome questions asked through Q&A during the presentation, and for those we will also try to get answers, but we're going to hold all of the questions until after the presentation. So you should expect to be here for about 90 minutes for the entirety of the presentation and the Q&A. So when we've finished or you're ready to leave otherwise, please take a few minutes to fill out our survey. We'll provide the link in the chat multiple times. We want to know how the webinar was helpful and where we might make improvements. We take your comments seriously. So both in reviewing this webinar and your voices matter to us as we plan our future programs. So think about what it is that you might want some education on and share that with us. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts. And just as a small incentive for you to complete the survey, we'll be sending out a modest Amazon gift card to someone chosen at random from those who actually complete the survey. So you might as well complete it, give yourself a chance to win, and because somebody's going to get it, might as well be you. All right, so we have a poll going now that I'm assuming that you see because you're answering. But the question is, how confident are you in supporting teens who are living with depression? So your choices are very confident, confident, somewhat confident, or not confident. So I'll leave that for a minute for you all to answer. I'm just trying to figure out here we are. All right. Families for Depression Awareness, presumably you've been on our website just because you've registered, but sometimes you can get around it. So Families for Depression Awareness, we're a national nonprofit organization. We're based in Massachusetts, but we serve everyone. We help families recognize and cope with depression and bipolar disorder to get people well and prevent suicides. From our experience, we know that mood disorders affect a whole family. It's probably your experience too. Beyond the genetic factors that can increase the likelihood of someone having depression or bipolar disorder, family dynamics and our everyday lives can be disrupted when one person is struggling. FFDA wants people to know this so that everyone in a family can have their needs addressed and get support. Our niche is that we offer education resources and strategies specifically for family caregivers. To us, family caregivers hold an important place in suicide prevention. They're often the first to notice signs of a problem. They're highly motivated to act, and they're positioned often to marshal the resources that are needed to get their loved one into care and on the path to mental wellness. So you are valued, and we hope you see yourselves that way as well. Again, our website is at familyware.org. You can find information, instruction, and inspiration. Sign up for our monthly newsletter. You'll get notice of new blog posts and videos, upcoming webinars and live streams, and resources that you can use. Um, and in an unusual twist, I'm going to share a special message. I'm sure you're aware that nonprofit organizations are reeling from funding cuts and shifting priorities. Families for Depression Awareness is fortunate to have committed donors who believe in the importance of our mission. They make it possible for us to provide webinars like this for free. But in these times, it's currently much more competitive for a nonprofit to get financial support, even from previously reliable sources. So if you find that this webinar is helpful to you, or you simply just believe in our mission, we hope you'll make a donation to help other families address the challenges that can come with mental health issues. Thank you so much. All right, let's take a look at the agenda. And then we'll go back to the poll. We'll start off with understanding teen depression. We'll talk some about how to reverse the downward spiral. We'll talk about more ways that parents and caring adults can help. We'll segue to our Q&A, and then we'll invite you to do the survey. But where we are right now is that we asked how confident you were, and many of you are somewhat confident. So that's certainly room to learn, which we love. For those of you who are not confident, we're confident you're going to get something out of this. For those of you who are very confident, I'll be curious to read your surveys and find out what you thought, whether we're confirming what you know, giving you anything new. So thank you all so much for participating in that. There will be some other polls throughout the program, so we'll call them to your attention. All right, so I am so excited that today we have with us Dr. Amy Mezulis. She's a PhD, a licensed clinical psychologist who specializes in teen depression. She is professor emeritus at Seattle Pacific University, where she spent 20 years as core faculty and chaired the clinical psychology PhD program. So there are lots of people running around who have learned from her. Dr. Mezulis' research on teen depression has been funded by the National Institute on Mental Health, the National Association of Research in Schizophrenia and Depression, and the American Psychological Association. Her most recent book is Reversing the Spiral of Depression for Teens: Simple Actions to Improve Mood, Boost Motivation, and Build the Life You Want. Dr. Mezulis is also the co-founder and former chief clinical officer at June Care, which is a telehealth company that provides online therapy for teens and young adults. Just so you know, that's JOON Care. Dr. Mezulis received her BA from Harvard University here in Massachusetts and her PhD from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. She currently maintains a private practice, serves on the board of June Care, and volunteers as a disaster mental health specialist with the Red Cross and Psy-Corps. And with all of that, she has still found time to help us with this, and we are grateful. So with that, I will turn the program over to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Um, yes, I will also add to those in the audience, I am also a parent. In addition to sort of being a researcher and a psychologist, I have a 19 and a 22-year-old, so still a teen and a very recent teen. And so for many, many years, I would say about teen depression that I was sort of living and breathing it from all the perspectives, as you know, a clinician, as a researcher and academic, and as a parent myself. And so I hope that all those perspectives I'll bring today. And I want to start with just teen depression is unfortunately really common, and it's really scary. If you are a parent or a caregiver, if you're a new clinician, I saw some folks coming in on the chat who work with families from more of a clinical perspective. There's really just nothing more frightening than being worried about your child or your teenager. And depression is very hard to watch. It's hard to experience. It's also hard for us as caregivers to watch. And one of my goals for today is to sort of take one of the things that we know about depression. One of the core emotions of depression is hopelessness, the sense that things are never going to get better. And when someone in our lives is depressed and they're feeling hopeless, it's easy for us to start feeling hopeless as well. And one of my goals today is to just shine a little bit of hope on that situation, to give you an anchor to hold on to that things might get a little bit better. You'll see another poll popping up, asking sort of where you are in your relationship with having a teen with depression. If you are currently supporting a teen who has depression, someone who's currently diagnosed, someone who is not diagnosed, but you believe they have symptoms or could use some support. You want to be prepared, or maybe you're not currently supporting a teen with depression, but you are trying to increase your knowledge or believe it might be coming. So we'll be interested in hearing your answers to that. They'll pop up here for all of us in a minute. And so we can, as we're waiting on that, we can move forward. So I want to talk a little bit about how depression is both common, but also very treatable. One fun fact, are there fun facts about depression, is that actually untreated, like with no intervention at all, most depressive episodes will resolve themselves inside of 6 months. Now, if you're a teenager, 6 months is a really long time. But I tell you that to hold on to the fact that depression has a time course. It is episodic, and it will sort of wear itself out. And along the way, there are a lot of things that we can do to help shorten that time course. So it's very treatable. We're going to talk today about what that downward spiral of depression is and how we can reverse it and help teens sort of make positive gains. The skills that I'm going to be introducing both talk about prevention. They can be used with someone who's experiencing just depressed mood or the normal ups and downs of being a teenager, all the way through intervention, meaning someone who is currently experiencing depression, and we're really trying to help them feel better. And the last thing that I want to emphasize that we're going to end with is sort of the role of caring adults, parents, caregivers, older siblings, supportive parents and clinicians in the community, the ways in which you can support the teens in your life. And I saw the poll pop up really fast here. It looks like more than half of folks on this webinar are either currently supporting a teen with depression or a teen who needs some mental health support, whether it's depression or not. So I'm glad you're here, and I hope that this is relevant to you. All right, let's start off with some of the facts about depression. Really common. So depression is really uncommon in young children. Under age about 11, we're talking less than 5%. So 1 in 20 kids will experience a depressive episode. And for young children, a depressive episode is almost always in response to a very clearly identifiable stressful event. So they move, or there's a loss in the family. Something happens that is outside their norm, and part of their reaction to that is a depressive episode. As we enter into adolescence, a bunch of things happen. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the risk factors of adolescence, and we see this steady increase in depression from age 11 till about age 18, where it steadies out for most of adulthood and then declines a little bit in midlife and increases again in later life. Where rates of depression go from, like 5% to something like between 15 and 20%. So 1 in 6 teens will experience a depressive episode by age 18. And that number can be higher for certain populations. So females are particularly vulnerable to depressive episodes, as are LGBTQ youth and youth from some minority backgrounds. Obviously, there are certain life factors that can increase in addition to identifying characteristics. Things like having been exposed to trauma or loss or grief can also increase the risk for depression. But if we just take all teenagers around, if you walk into any, high school classroom, you're going to find that, across that kid's high school life, 1 in 5 to 1 in 6 of them are going to experience depressive episodes. So the rates are really high by the end of adolescence. Beyond sort of diagnosable depression, and we're going to talk in a minute about how to recognize and diagnose depression, about half of teens will have depression symptoms that are what we call clinically significant, meaning they may or may not meet diagnostic criteria, but they are associated with impairment. They are impacting the teen's ability to feel well and function well in their life. So that's 50% of teens. That's a lot of kids. I see questions coming by the way. I can't see everything as we're doing it. We're going to have questions at the end. One of them I just saw pop across the bottom of the screen was about rates of depression in neurodivergent teens. And I'm just going to answer it really quickly because it came across. Yes, there's a couple things. One, we do know that rates of depression are higher in kids who have a co-occurring ADHD or ASD diagnosis. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's probably some genetic loading that overlaps. But one of the reasons is that adolescence is a really stressful time. And if you have additional characteristics, like being on the spectrum or struggling with ADHD, some of the social and academic challenges are even more stressful for you. And as a teenager, to become aware of those. So there may be a greater risk of depression, anxiety as well in kids who are neurodivergent. And we can talk more about it in the discussion time. So let's talk a little bit about how to recognize depression among teens. Let's start by saying depression symptoms are really broad and varied, and they overlap with a lot of other diagnosable conditions, as well as the normal ups and downs of day-to-day life. And so it can be challenging to recognize depression. And we're always looking at sort of a cluster of things that are happening simultaneously to really differentiate depression from sort of a normal bad day or bad week, from anxiety, from other potential diagnoses. The one thing I say before we get into the mental health symptoms is there are physical health conditions that are also commonly first diagnosed in adolescence that can really mimic depression and be hard to differentiate. The ones that come up in particular, and I'm in Seattle, so the second one is a really big factor for us, but hypothyroidism, so having a thyroid that's not well managed can look very similar to depression. Low vitamin D can look very much like depression, and anemia, so sort of low iron count, can all mimic depression. And so, especially for teens who have been functioning well, have not had any identifiable stressors or big changes in their life, who have a lot of the physical symptoms of depression, so fatigue in particular, if that comes on very suddenly and is really dominated by fatigue, I would definitely consider a medical evaluation along the way of considering what else might be going on in terms of mental health to rule out any physical health causes. Okay, that's my caveat. We'll come back to mental health. So I like to go through what I call the ABCs of depression. So A is for affect, that's sort of mood and emotions. B for behavior, this is the things that we're doing. And C for cognition, so sort of what's going on in terms of our brain and our thinking, both in terms of process and content. All right, so let's go through those. So A for affect. We tend to think about depression as sadness, and that can definitely be true. For adults, we often see sad mood being the dominant mood characteristic. Teens can show up, depression can show up a little bit differently. Probably the sort of emotional state we see most often in teens, the two most often are what the formal term is anhedonia, but what it looks to us as adults is sort of like that apathetic, bored, don't care. You'll hear kids say, I don't care. I just don't care. You're telling me I'm going to fail my class. I don't care. You're telling me I'm like losing my friends. I don't care. You're telling me this is the consequence. I don't care. That I don't care feeling, this anhedonia, this difficulty experiencing positive emotions, experiencing motivation to do things, sort of caring about the future and outcome, that's a really dominant mood state for a lot of teens with depression. The other one that's really common for teens beyond sad is this sort of reactive mood. And it can look a lot like irritability. It can be sort of stress reactive, but also really irritable. And diagnostically, actually, irritability is considered a diagnostic mood state for depression for children and teens. It's not for adults. Other emotional states you might see, feeling hopeless, and we'll come to these in thoughts as well, but sort of feeling like not a good person, feeling worthless, or feeling unusually guilty about things, especially things that are perhaps not really attributed to them. So sadness can be one of the mood states, but I am more often to see that sort of apathetic, I don't care, and irritability for teens. All right, behavior. If we can move the slide forward, Susan. Oh, thank you. And you can click that forward so it can show too if it's second. There we go. So behavior change is really common in teens. So sometimes we're not able to articulate our emotional state. It shows up in the things that we're doing. Probably the biggest thing that hits most teens with depression is a drop off in motivation. You just find that they have a really hard time organizing, motivating themselves to do the things that they used to do. And this can be all the things. This can be schoolwork. This can be going to their job. This can be their sports or extracurriculars. This can be hanging out with their friends. Things that they used to do easily with pleasure, with enjoyment, they no longer seem to want to do or seem to enjoy. So that motivation is usually the biggest thing that we see. What does that look like then? A lot of withdrawal. So we'll see kids isolating. We'll see kids quitting their after school activities. We'll see kids not turning in their homework or not going to class. So a lot of sort of pulling out of their normal activities. And you see sort of like this full life that they used to have kind of getting smaller. There can be some really changes to sort of basic biology too. So we'll often see changes to sleep and eating patterns in either direction. So compared to sort of their typical sleeping too much, so you'll see kids who can't get out of bed to go to school, then come home and take a nap, and you're like, what is wrong with them that they're sleeping 14 hours a day? But also sometimes sleeping too little, having a really hard time falling asleep or staying asleep. And then, of course, not surprisingly, they're going to be really fatigued during the day. You can also see changes to eating. So eating too much, what looks sort of like emotion eating or overeating, but also having no appetite. Like if you don't care about much, that can sometimes include, I don't get the same pleasure out of a meal that I used to get out of. Especially the younger you go, the older you get in teens, the more you see things that look like us as adults recognize. You see moods that we can put the same label on. But the younger you go, especially younger teens, you'll often see these really just very basic biological changes that, and again, like if it's really biological, you definitely want to rule out medical causes, but see really just basic changes to eating and sleeping. One really common characteristic of depression is what's called early morning awakening. So waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning and not being able to get back to sleep, even though you haven't had enough sleep. And so that's one of the first questions I'll ask someone who's having sleep trouble is, are they waking up at 4 or 5 in the morning and then having a hard time getting back to sleep? And that sometimes it seems to be something that has shifted in our biological sleep rhythm. All right, the C is for cognition. So this is our thoughts, and thoughts have both sort of process and content. So in terms of content, what we find is that when people are depressed, a lot of negative thoughts about themselves, about others. So a lot of self-critical thoughts, a lot of self-blaming thoughts. Often teens will get really fascinated with death, and this is not always suicidal thoughts. It can be, but it can also be fascination with deaths in the natural world or really dark themes, movies and books with themes around death. Interested in deaths among animal communities. So it doesn't have to necessarily be self-referent suicidal thoughts, but thoughts of death, self or others really common. Of course, it can be suicidal thoughts, and we'll definitely want to be worried about those. We're going to talk about when to worry in a minute. In terms of process, we also see that depression really impacts our brain's ability to function. And one of the first thing a teen will tell you is that they can't concentrate. So part of what happens in the sort of downward spiral that we're going to talk about in terms of motivation and schoolwork is when you're not feeling well, it can be really difficult to concentrate on your geometry homework. Also really difficult to care about your geometry homework when you're feeling depressed. And so between the not caring much and having difficulty concentrating, it's really hard to get that homework done. The other one that's really common is difficulty making what seem like they should be easy decisions. Also, one of the questions I'll often ask is, do you stand in your closet and not be able to decide what to wear? Or you go to a restaurant and you can't decide what to order off the menu, when typically you are a pretty decisive person. It seems something happens when we're depressed that our brain has a hard time making decisions. And then the other process is the sort of repetitive thinking, worry or rumination. So worry is just a lot of repetitive thinking, typically about the future, what could happen. Rumination is repetitive thinking about the past, sort of playing over, oh, I said this, I did this, and now I'm ruminating on the mistake that I made. All really common patterns in depression. All right, so when do we worry? So here's the thing about mood is we all have depressed mood. Depressed mood is common. We have a bad day, we feel down. It is normal to feel down if something stressful or bad happens. It's normal to feel sad. It's also normal to feel tired and overwhelmed at times. And so I think there's a reasonable question of like, when is it normal and when do we worry? So I usually have two characteristics for when to worry. One is impairment. So mood up and down worries me less if the kid is safe, if they're practicing self-care, meaning they're showering, they're getting themselves to school, and if they're doing the stuff of their life. They're going to school, they're keeping up with their schoolwork, they're keeping themselves clean, and they're keeping themselves safe, then I might want to support them. They may still be struggling with their mood, but I'm not worried about their overall well-being. So the first one is impairment, is sort of what areas of their life is it impacting. And then the other is duration, so it's normal to have a bad day. It's even normal to have a bad week. If you really, something really unusual happens or you have a breakup. I mean, for kids in high school, sometimes that first breakup is really hard. Let's give them 5, 6 days to be really sad, to struggle, to have a hard time getting out of bed. But if it's more than 2 weeks, and typically at that point, it's starting to affect things like school, then I start to worry. So duration and impairment is sort of how you can tell the difference between normal mood variability and when to worry. So what's causing depression? I want to talk about kind of two things briefly. One, there's a bunch of stuff that is just happening all at once in adolescence that makes it this kind of perfect storm, and we see depression in particular just skyrocket. But that's kind of across all teens, and then, like, I think it's important to think about for specific teens, like, for any given person, they have their own spiral that sort of takes them down that has shared characteristics, and I wanna walk through those. So that perfect storm, there's a bunch of stuff that's happening under the hood, so biologically happening for teens. We see a normal sleep, what's called the sleep offset. So starting at about 13 or 14, the biorhythm that was keeping us able to go to sleep at 8 or 9 o'clock at night shifts by up to 3 hours, so 1 to 3 hours. And so teens are not tired at the time they used to be tired. They are not tired until 11 or 12 o'clock. But oddly, school has not shifted, and so they're still getting up at 6 or 7 in the morning, and so kids are not as sleepy as they used to be. Their natural biorhythm has shifted. The world has not shifted for them, and so we have chronically, typically sleep-deprived teens. That's difficult. The hormone changes of going through puberty, part of what's happening in addition to hormone changes is the neurotransmitter systems of serotonin and dopamine are setting, and as that is, happening, we have, sort of the neurotransmitter systems are allowing teens to be more emotionally reactive without having as much sensitivity to pleasure. Dopamine systems are particularly poorly regulated at this age. And the serotonin system that helps us manage stress is still coming online. And so teens are sort of biologically more stress reactive and less sensitive to positive input. And so you can imagine that's uncomfortable. And of course, some kids are more emotional by nature. And then as these sort of hormonal and neurotransmitter systems are shifting, they sort of get bumped from like, yeah, maybe they were slightly anxious or withdrawn or moody preteen, but now they're sort of become a teen that's more depressed. While all that is happening sort of under the hood, making kids more emotionally reactive, all the stuff that keeps us functioning well, which is typically run by our prefrontal cortex, is still coming online. And so one of the challenges of being a teen is that all the biological changes that make you emotional come online in early adolescence, early to mid adolescence, but all the biological changes that help you regulate your emotions don't come online until your early 20s. So you end up with this big period of time in which we sometimes call it like the engines have started, but there's no driver, like all this supercharged emotion, but nothing managing the system. So their executive functionings are still developing, their ability to regulate their emotions are still coming online. They don't have good decision making in emotion situations. They're more impulsive and sensation seeking, which can typically cause some negative consequences. And so it's a bad system. And then, of course, it's not an easy time right now to be a teen. And so you've got the increased demands of high school. Each transition to middle school, to high school, and to college. Each of those sees this big bump in depression at each of those transitions as kids are adjusting to new demands. You've got new peer networks, you've got romantic relationships and sexual relationships for the first time. You've got expectations by parents and society. And I would say, increasingly what I hear from teens that I work with is a lot of existential concerns about the economy, about my ability to get into college and get a job, about climate change, things that they may not be able to directly impact, but they feel sort of speak to the hope that they may have for their future. So that's big picture why adolescence is hard. But for any specific depressive episode, we can almost always map this kind of downward spiral. So depression doesn't just happen overnight. It typically takes days and weeks to really get from a bad day or a bad mood to what we would call a depressive episode that's really entrenched. And this is often what it looks like. Something often typically happens. I mean, and the stressful vet may not even seem totally recognizable. It doesn't have to be huge. It can be an argument with a friend or a bad grade on a test, or parents getting mad at you because your room was dirty. But there's some negative emotions there. You might feel angry. You might feel disappointed. You might feel sad or anxious. Those emotions in turn trigger some of those negative thoughts. I've messed up. What's going to happen to me? I'm a failure. Those don't feel good. We often feel when we have negative emotions, negative thoughts, some fatigue, some physical symptoms. We decide to take a nap after school rather than going to our after school activity. We don't get our homework done. Our motivation is low. And if you do that enough times, right, you don't go to your after school activity or you don't get your homework done, you start to accumulate more stressors. All of a sudden, now you're behind in class. What felt like one day of taking a nap is now I'm behind at school, or one day off your extracurricular. Now your coach is mad at you. That's more stress that feels overwhelming, and the spiral sort of keeps going. And when that goes on and on, we can end up with depression. So let's talk about one example, and one of the workbook that I published last year that is the foundation of much of this talk has a couple teens that we follow, and one of them is a kid, Sam, and what his downward spiral of depression looks like. So Susan, we can move forward to the next slide. So in my workbook, we talk about this kid who moves to a new school in the middle of high school, right? He's not really happy about this move. He doesn't like the new school. He's feeling kind of down, feeling angry, misses his friends, has those thoughts, those negative thoughts. I'm never going to be happy here. And doesn't want to or show any interest in kind of joining things at school. Kid who had been active in band and theater doesn't want to lean into the new school because he's not happy about this move. Well, what happens then? Then we're not actually involved in activities. We're sitting in our room. We're not having social interaction. Doesn't seem to want to care about much, so not getting his homework done. Well, what's happening then? Well, then his parents are annoyed with him. Why is your homework not getting done? His grades aren't doing well. He doesn't have a peer group to rely on. The old friends have moved on and he hasn't made new friends. And not surprisingly, Sam is getting more and more depressed. So this kind of downward spiral, and every person has their own spiral, is common though across people, meaning everybody has something that is their own spiral, their own typical emotion response, their own typical cognitive response, their own way in which they behaviorally, do they avoid, do they lash out and get in fights, what happens to their motivation. And when we understand that for someone, that actually becomes our superpower as the parents and caregivers, because we can then start to reverse that spiral. And that's what we're going to talk about next, is how to reverse the spiral of depression for anyone with depression. We're going to talk about a bunch of things. We're going to talk about sort of 3 steps to reversing this downward spiral. One is, when you feel really crappy, the first thing you need to do is start feeling better. So we're going to talk about some sort of basic strategies for just starting to feel better. The motivation hit typically means we're behind on things we've been withdrawing. We're behind on schoolwork, the tasks that need done in life. So we have to figure out how to kind of get motivation back and get our life back on track. And then we want to talk about how to sort of just strengthen their reserves so that the next time something happens, they're a little bit more resilient to it. And that's the strengthening of the positives. So that's sort of the formula we're going to go to. I will say, and this is from both being a parent and having worked with hundreds upon hundreds of teens, Not every teen will like every strategy. I would even go so far as to say most teens will dislike many of the strategies. But there's a lot of different techniques and a lot of different points in that spiral. Some kids respond really well to the cognitive techniques. Some respond really well to the behavioral activation techniques. Some respond really well to just the emotion coping. It doesn't matter what they respond to, because if you intervene at any point in that spiral, you're going to start changing things and the others start to come online. And so the goal is not to get your teen to do every one of these. The goal is to try a few and see sort of what connects. All right, so let's start with feeling better. So depressed teen, not feeling great. What are we going to do? What are some of the strategies that we can use to start feeling better? So I want to talk about three categories, some really basics, like basics of your body. We're going to talk about sleep and we're going to talk about exercise. I'm a big believer in getting back to basics in terms of regulating mood. Then we're going to talk about your brain, sort of how to get your thoughts back into a more positive way. And then we're going to talk about coping strategies. All right, so back to basics. One of my sayings is rest is best. So teens need enough sleep. We have a poll popping up now about struggling with sleep. And I'm super interested in the answers to this, because my gut is they're going to be pretty mixed between some are sleeping too much and some are not sleeping enough. Sleeping too much is typically a reaction to being depressed, but the sleeping not enough is often a trigger. And so depression can cause sleep disruption in many ways. And getting that disrupted sleep back on track is one great way to just at least give the teen the maximum possibility to regulate their mood best. And we know this as adults. When we're tired, like when we are tired and dysregulated, we are not coping well. Like we are not focusing, we're not on task, we're more irritable. And so we want to think about what we can do to get enough sleep and not too much. Couple basics of sleep hygiene. Okay, here we go. So we have pretty even split. So some folks are like, I'm not answering. Only 10% are like, my teen gets the right amount of sleep. But otherwise, it's kind of split. Some are saying, a lot are saying they don't sleep enough. Okay, so this is good. And then some sleeping too much, which is usually a sign of needing some other strategies in their life. So I'm going to talk a little bit. It's going to sound a little bit more like the kids who don't sleep enough. Regular bedtime. And we can talk about parenting strategies at the end, but regular bedtime means a window, and the window should be similar weekdays and weekends. There's a bit of a habit we get into where when we don't get enough sleep during the week, we then nap or sleep 12 or 14 hours on the weekend. And if your teen is doing well and that's their sleep rhythm, more power to them. Like sleep, if it works for you, it works for you. But if your teen is not doing well, then getting that sleep rhythm back into something that's a little bit more consistent is one tool. So a regular bedtime, this is the least favorite thing that teens want to hear, but it's true. We have to get off our screens for a period of time before bed to just give our brain a chance to quiet down enough to give us a fighting chance of falling asleep. And so a bedtime routine that includes even 15 or 20 minutes of reading an actual book, listening to music, showering, stretching, but something that does not involve being on their screen really helps your brain settle down. Divvying up the room. So teens like to spend a lot of time in their room. They like to spend a little time on their bed. But one of the things about disrupted sleep and not sleeping enough is the body not knowing the difference between when I'm supposed to sleep and when I'm supposed to do other things. And so practicing the skill of, if you're going to be on your screen or you're going to be doing homework, at least be out of your bed, even be on your floor. I would be okay with, if we can try to get out of the bed and use the bed really just for sleeping. And napping, this is my least, like, teens hate this conversation. And so I saw some notes out there being like, teens aren't going to do this. I'm still telling you what best practices are. Some teens can work on this. Sometimes they're willing to try the no screen time before bed. Actually, Pew Research had a study out this week showing that 45% of teens believe that social media and internet use is bad for their mental health and bad for their friends' mental health. And that's almost double what it was 2 years ago. 2 years ago, it was something like 22 or 23%. And so teens are increasingly recognizing the impact of their devices on their own well-being. So I think we are entering a stage where we might have a little bit more of a hook for this. Napping is the death knell for sleep. The body relies on something called sleep debt, meaning like it's been enough time since I've been asleep, like 8 to 10 hours since I was asleep, that my body is now tired enough, even if I'm chronically sleep deprived, tired enough to go back to sleep. And so cutting out napping is one of the ways we can increase the odds of getting good sleep at night. Okay, but this is only one tool in our toolbox. We have other tools. In addition to sleep as a basic, some physical activity every day also helps regulate sleep and helps regulate mood. This does not have to be exercise. I really like the idea of movement and naturally occurring movement way more than talking about getting in shape, exercise, or weight. We want to be talking about the benefits of, just like you need to put vitamins and minerals in your body every day, your body needs to move a little bit every day. And this can be as much things as parking a little bit farther away from school, so you have to walk in farther, or picking them up a block or two away from school, walking the dog, doing YouTube videos in their own room. If they are someone who's like, I'm not even going to get out of the room, yoga, stretching, body weight exercises in your room that are led by a YouTube video, going on walks as a family on the weekend, going for a bike ride, things that are just natural occurring movement are good for your mood, and building those more in. If you look at your family and you say, we are a family that does not have a lot of movement in our family, see where you can add things in to help with both sleep and then mood regulation. Okay, moving on from the biological, let's talk a little bit about some of those brain techniques. One of the biggest things that causes depression and maintains depression is the cycle of negative thinking. And anyone who's been with a depressed teen has heard this, has heard these really negative thoughts about themselves, about the world, about other people. And there are a lot of phrases for these cognitive distortions. I like the term thinking traps that feel like they're right, but they're really shortcuts our brain are taking. And when our mood is negative, our brain wants to match our thoughts to our mood state. And so we really have to be effortful to move past those thinking traps. Some of the most common ones for teens are black and white thinking. So really seeing things as either all good or all bad. Self-focused thinking, that's just developmentally appropriate. Teens are very self-focused, but thinking that something that happens, right? Like I've heard teens say, oh, I had a pop quiz in math today because my teacher is just out to get me. And you're like, I really don't think the math teacher had the pop quiz anything to do with you, but that is what it feels like to them. Like they knew I'm having a bad day. They know I'm not in a good mood. And this is really just to make it even worse for me. And that self-focused thinking can make life very difficult because things feel very self-referential. Crystal ball, imagining what's going to happen in the future. There's no point in doing X because I just know. Like there's no point in turning in my math homework because I just know my teacher is going to fail me anyways. So forecasting the future as a way of explaining the present. Gray colored glasses, this sort of sense of everything is looked at a little bit more negatively. We're going to, we're going on a family vacation this summer. Oh, I'm sure it'll be stupid. And that immediate response back. And then the last one that's really common for teens is emotion brain. So they have very strong emotions. Our emotions really color how we think about things. And we believe that if we feel it, it must be true. So I feel overwhelmed. I must have too much to do. It must actually be overwhelming. Or I feel isolated or ignored. It must be true that people don't like me. And moving past that, being able to see the space between how you feel and other explanations is a goal that we can work on. So how are some of the ways that we can do that? This is one place where other adults can be really helpful in reframing some of those negative thoughts. And I will say that I find that teens are really sensitive in a not good way to adults that just come at them really positively in response to all their negative thoughts because it feels so invalidating, right? Like, I had a terrible day. I'm sure your day was great. Tell me all the good things about your day. How invalidating is that, right? Um, but instead, trying to find that more balanced or realistic way can sometimes be a little more approachable. So instead of things like, I suck, helping to say, yeah, that didn't go very well. I can see you're still learning and improving though. It's acknowledging the part that was hard and giving an alternative way of saying, yeah, that wasn't good, but I can look at it in a way that's more balanced. I'm going to feel this way forever. It's never going to get better. Saying, I know that's how you feel right now. I've had times where I felt that way too and was surprised when I did see that things got better. And I trust things will get better for you, even though they're hard right now. That combination of sort of the validating where they are now, but sort of transitioning it to a slightly more balanced, slightly more positive way of seeing things is one of the superpowers of helping with depression. And those of you who have done research or read about therapy have, I'm sure, heard of cognitive behavioral therapy. And this slide is what cognitive therapy is. And it's weeks of work with therapists or people to do it and lots of workbooks out there on it. But when we learn how to catch and reframe our own negative thoughts, this is the number one recommended treatment to not only treat depression, but it actually prevents, the only therapy out there that prevents future depression. So one of the things that adults can really do is just help with that sort of catching and sort of reframing that negative soundtrack that's in their mind. Okay. So we're talking a little bit about sort of how to feel better, like right now, catching those negative thoughts, trying to get some of the biological drivers back on track, the being sedentary and the not sleeping well. One of the things that's hard for teens with depression, one of the things that really pushes their parents and caregivers' buttons is this issue of motivation. Because that is such a bad downward spiral, right? Like, I don't feel like doing anything, so then I don't do things. And then I have all this undone schoolwork and I'm not doing well. I'm not meeting my goals. And it starts to become this really self-fulfilling prophecy. So I want to talk a little bit about why depression is related to procrastination and then ways to sort of beat that. That's what we're going to talk about right now. So what's the downward spiral of depression that really produces procrastination? It's a really common problem. Many of us, when we feel overwhelmed, we tend to cope by procrastinating, and it's a really, pretty vicious spiral. So one of the ways this looks is like, I have a lot to do, right? Like I've got, I think about, and I just had I still have a 19-year-old who's in college, right? And it's like, I've got job applications and I've got a paper to do and I've got a problem set due. And, and mom's on me to tell me like, when my winter break is. And, when she's home, it's like, also, can you please take your, laundry downstairs and can you empty the dishwasher while I'm at work? And it's, the list of stuff can sometimes feel like there's a lot. And when you're a teen, there's often that list is very, very long. It's not surprising that they feel overwhelmed. And when we feel overwhelmed, it's very easy for the negative thought to come in. I'm never going to get it all done. And there's a little bit of like buried in there. So what's the point? Why try if I will never get it all done? And I feel so overwhelmed, I'm just gonna avoid it because none of us likes to actually tackle a mountain. A mountain feels really overwhelming. But when we don't do the things, we tend to feel even more overwhelmed and accumulate more stress, right? Mom's mad that the dishwasher is not unloaded and your homework never got turned in. And so the next day you wake up and you have even more to do, and it just becomes a bigger problem and you feel more depressed. So depression and procrastination are like this really unhealthy sibling relationship that walk hand in hand. But we can use some of the same techniques to combat procrastination. So one of them is recognizing those thoughts, those procrastination thoughts, and trying to identify and challenge those procrastination thoughts. And so Susan, we can move forward to the next slide. So instead of thinking, I'm never going to get it all done, reminding ourselves of times before that we've taken something big and overwhelming and breaking it down, right? And like, there's that old saying, right? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, like you eat anything else. You eat your large plate of food exactly the same way that you eat a snack. You still just do it one bite at a time. And so helping with that reframing of what's the very first thing that we can do. Let's not look at the end or the whole mountain. What's the very first step that we can do? There's so much to do. Well, we can do one thing at a time. Again, this is something that adults can really help teens with shaping, is how can we change it from the elephant to what that first bite is? Let's make a list of all the things that need to get done. What's one thing we could get done in the next 15 minutes? Let's just do one. Let's get one thing done. And the one thing done sometimes gives us enough little bit of positive feedback loop that we can maybe get the second one done too. Another great strategy, then sort of reframing from the whole set to one small step, is to really be good about setting SMART goals. And I'm sure you've seen this acronym around. SMART goals are smart, measure, or specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, which is just a lot of words of saying a goal that is reasonable, meaning like it makes sense from where you are now, right? One of the things I always say is like, if my goal is to run a marathon and I currently don't run, which is true, I can walk a few miles, then my SMART goal is not go out and run 10 miles tomorrow. My SMART goal is tomorrow, maybe I'm going to run half a mile because I'm starting from zero. If I'm starting from zero, I have to set a goal that's somehow connected to where I am. If we're doing no homework, we're not going to do all the homework tomorrow. We're going to do one small piece of the homework. So we have to be, achievable, relevant goals have to be ones that make sense from where you are. They also need to be measurable, meaning you would actually know if you did it. So a couple examples on the side of the screen. I'll get more exercise. Great. Love it. I mean, I love the like intention. It's not a SMART goal. The SMART goal is I'll do 10 minutes of something 4 times this week. Maybe your SMART goal is I'll do 5 minutes today. Maybe that's your SMART goal, but you know it's reasonable from where you are and you'll know if you had it done. I'm going to work one with kids I do all the time is about how they do their homework. I'm not going to do my math homework. I am going to sit down and in chapter 4, I'm going to do the first 5 of the 10 problems assigned today. That's the first thing I'm going to do. It's very specific and I know when it's done. The example here is, it's not I'm going to work on it. I'm going to spend 30 minutes making an outline. And then you know when you're done with that, successfully or not. This is a really big life skill and one that teenagers don't have unless someone helps them with it. And so this is a great one for parents and caregivers to support them with. And another strategy for motivation is chunking. So chunking is just like the sort of cognitive belief of taking it one step at a time rather than looking at the whole mountain. Chunking is the behavioral process of breaking down a task. And so, especially when you have a lot to do, and the number of teens that I know, one of the vicious cycles that could happen, one of the parts of the downward spiral, and parents play a role in this is saying, there's no whatever, you don't get to go out with your friends or you don't get to go to your sport. All you're going to do is do your homework. So you're going to come home from school and do homework until you go to bed. Oh, I mean, I don't know a single kid who can come home at 4 o'clock and maintain motivation until 10 o'clock at night. And so we really want to use chunking to break down time and tasks. So focusing for just a little bit. This is one way, 15 minutes and a 5-minute break. Teens who are really struggling, it might need to be 5 or 8 minutes and a 5-minute break. But if we work in small chunks and then get a chance to get up, walk around, I really recommend that one of the strategies for this is for social media is that your phone is away for that 15 minutes and then your break can be the quick check-in with your TikTok or your Instagram. But then when you're working again, you put it away to the side. But chunking down the work time into smaller chunks makes it feel a little bit less overwhelming and unmanageable. And then finally, we want to make sure that we're, sort of setting up our environment to make it as easy to focus as possible. So we want to reduce distractions, phone to the side, turn off music. No matter how many times your teen tells you that they need all those things to be able to focus, the data is unequivocal. The brain does not multitask. The brain needs to be able to focus. What we actually need is things like having been well rested, having had a snack, we need to be fed, we need to be hydrated, we need to be biologically able to focus, but we do not need other distractions to focus. Physical needs, good night's sleep and well fed. And so I definitely, if a kid needs to take a little bit of time after school to decompress, have a snack, do something relaxing and fun, and then get to their schoolwork, absolutely. That sets them up for being able to focus. Create an area that is dedicated to focusing and calm. That can be somewhere else in the house, but it should be free of clutter. It should be free of a lot of distractions, and it's the place you go to do work. And as we talked about, trying to get out of the bed as much as possible. And then to-do lists that focus on small tasks, setting smart goals that are achievable with clear points of check-in. And, I mean, sort of like potty training, like, when we were giving our kids stickers and M&Ms to go on the potty, we are not doing that with our teenagers anymore. You sitting down with your depressed teen and helping them every day with a to-do list for the period of time in which they're learning that skill and getting through their depression, you're not going to be doing that for them in college or at their first job. You will be able to wean them off. But if that's what they need right now, if that's a way in which, as a caregiver, we can support them, that is an appropriate support. And you can talk about how to remove that support later. But I would not do it because they shouldn't need it. They're 16. They shouldn't need me to make them a to-do list. They might if they're depressed or they struggle with ADHD or they've had a setback in some of their outcomes. They might need your support for this right now. And those are things that we can give them. All right, so we've talked about some strategies for feeling better. We've talked about some things to sort of get that motivation and focus back on track. The last sort of, category of skills I want to talk about is how to help teens not just fight the depression and focus on how to sort of undo the negative in their life, but how to build some of the positives in our life. And there's two reasons for this. One, a lot of research coming out around positive psychology, and when we direct our attention to positive aspects of ourselves and our environment, that improves our mood. But also when we build teens who have awareness of their own strengths, who have the capacity to use social support, who have a positive outlook on life, they are much more resilient down the line to avoiding future depressive episodes. So there's a lot of bang for your buck here. And there's so much, especially when teens are struggling and their own self-talk is so negative. It's really easy for us to join in, like you're behind on school and you're not doing this and you've got to do this. And being able to look at them and be like, where are your strengths and what are the good qualities of your life that we can amplify it's an additional tool in our toolbox. So we're going to talk here about strengths-based parenting, power of gratitude, and social support. So identifying strengths is a great way to help kids also just build things that are working in their favor. It may be that their school or their extracurricular, for whatever reason, even their social life is not going their way, and that's a piece of their depression, whether it was a cause or a consequence of their depression. But every single human has character strengths and traits that can be leveraged to help them build a life that's founded on strengths. And so I encourage you with your own reflection of the teen that you are parent or caregiving or working with, or in collaboration with them, to help identify and point out the strengths in their life and not just the places that they are struggling. Point out their strengths of being friendly and kind, or point out their creativity or their curiosity or their honesty, even if they're just being honest about their negative feelings. There's an aspect to that that's really positive. Their role in the family, their role with people, the things that are going well, and help them see those strengths in them too. Sometimes we don't have enough people telling us what we're doing right. We only have people telling us what we're doing wrong. And then help them figure out how they can leverage those strengths. Where can they build those into their life a little bit more? Can they, uh, uh, where one activity I'll do with teens is, okay, we're going to identify our 3 or 5 core strengths, and I'll sort of be like, where is it showing up in your life and where could it show up more? Right? So my kindness is an inherent quality. I'm always nice to people. I'm never mean. I could be kinder to my sibling, or I could reach out to a friend more. And so it's a both and, where we can sort of say this is where we already are, but it's also a place where I can build. And when we're bringing in additional positive things into our life, that really can have positive impact on our mood. The other sort of positive psychology strategy is around gratitude, also one that parents and caregivers can really model and set and create the opportunity for. A lot of research showing that daily gratitude not only improves mood, but makes us more resilient. That people who practice gratitude regularly, who can sort of like find the silver lining, find something to be grateful for, are more resilient to coping with stress when those stresses happen. So these can be things like one of my favorites is, breakfast or dinner, if there's a meal, even if it's once a week, there's family meal or a time when we're all together, Or if you're someone who does work with teens, I'll do this in therapy sessions, or I'll do it in schools. Rose, thorn, bud, right? Rose, something that's going well in my life. Thorn, something that I'm struggling with. And bud, something I'm looking forward to. Trains our brain to be able to identify the things that are going well in our lives. Other strategies, a journal. There's lots of great apps that are gratitude apps. But if your teen isn't going to do it naturally, then it's something that you can model and evoke with them. And even just show that you're able to do it, able to be like, oh, this was a hard part about my day, but this also went well, and I appreciate that. And then the last thing, in terms of building strength and resiliency is, sort of helping your teen build that supportive network around them. And so some of that is knowing, like, where is your teen? Who are the people who are close to them? Who are the people who are pretty close, and and that concentric circles that goes out there. And also, I think we think a lot about peer groups for teens, but also important to remember that trusted adults are really important for teens as well. And so it may be that there is a teacher or a coach, an aunt, an older sibling, that is actually one of those closer relationships. It may not be another peer. Teens are not necessarily, they don't always have the skills to be good friends yet. That's a developmental skill that we have to acquire. And so it may be that the people who support your teen most are other adults in their lives. It may be you. You may be your teen's most trusted adult or the close person to them. And so Paul just went around asking about sort of, are you aware of who the trusted adults in your teen's life are? We'll get the results for that in a second. Oh, I love this. 61% that yes, we've talked about this. I know who their trusted adults are. Maybe it's you. And 17% of you saying, no, we haven't talked about this yet. And I like the yet in there, that there's a space there to know who could your teen go to for help and support. All right, as we get to the end of the sort of didactic part of this webinar, let's talk a little bit about ways that parents, caregivers, caring adults can help. And I think, having my older daughter was a senior in high school. My younger daughter was a freshman in high school when COVID hit. And plus, of course, my own sort of academic role as working with teens and young adults. I don't think anyone who watched young people go through COVID doubted anymore how important the network of adults in our kids' lives were, how important it was that there had been teachers and coaches and other family members who we were regularly in interaction with. And so parents are great, but also the folks who have other caring adult roles are really influential on teen development. So what are some things that you can do? Um, you know, uh, the old saying of like, put on your own air mask before you help someone else is really true. If you struggle with your mood, your depressed mood, your anxiety, your mood regulation, the way that you think negatively about yourself or others, you should assume that your teen models that and sees that. And so one thing that you can do is sort of check your own. Do you model the ability to plan? Do you model the ability to regulate your emotions? Do you model the ability to reframe negative thoughts into healthier and more adaptive thoughts? That's a really great place to start, which is, if my kid grew up to be like me, would that put them in a good place in terms of their mental health? And that's the number one place to start. Education is another great one too. A lot of data coming out saying that asking the question, are you feeling depressed? Asking the hard questions, are you suicidal? Have you ever thought about hurting yourself? Does not increase depression or suicidality. We know that the asking doesn't change the underlying emotion. All it does is create the opportunity for a conversation around it. And so being willing to educate yourself and your teen about what the signs are of depression, remembering that they might be different than they would be for you as an adult, that irritability, that withdrawal, that isolation, that change in motivation might be how it shows up for them, not sadness or some of the ways that you might have expected. Open communication. Um, Life is stressful. Life is stressful for parents and caregivers. It's stressful for adults, and it's stressful for teens. And so there are lots of opportunities in your day-to-day life for you to be practicing these healthy coping skills. Are you modeling good sleep habits? Are you modeling getting some movement in? Are you modeling being able to reframe your negative thoughts? Are you modeling managing your time and calendaring? Are you managing setting reasonable goals and working towards those? Are you able to identify your own strengths and social supports and talk about those in those language? Those are all those positive coping skills that we want our teens to develop. And the best thing we can be doing is modeling those ourselves. And then the last thing is, this is a lot of information. And one of the overwhelming feelings of depression is it's just so much. And now you're telling me like, oh, sleep and changing their work environment for school and setting reasonable goals. And I'm supposed to be practicing gratitude and getting them a gratitude app. And like, Amy, that's just too much. Yeah, it is too much. So just like anything else, one step at a time. If you left today going, there's one thing I want to try differently this next week. Maybe it's how you talk about something. One new thing you want to try after school. One new thing you want to do around the dinner table at night. Just one. That would be an awesome takeaway. I would feel so good about that for you and your family. Some language around communication. We were talking about this as the introduction. One of my sort of favorite sayings as a parent, as a psychologist, is validate the emotion, shape the behavior. All emotions are valid. Our emotional responses are how our body experiences and communicates things. There is nothing wrong with feeling sad, anxious, angry, anything, even numb. The times that it creates challenges for us are when the behaviors that we use in response to that create problems for us, right? It's okay to feel angry. It's not okay to hit someone. It's okay to feel down and unmotivated. You're probably going to regret failing out of school, so we want to be able to validate the emotional experience of our teens and help them act in ways that serve their interests in the long run. So how do we do that? Some of that is around how we communicate, expressing our own care and concern. I'm worried about you and I want to be here to support you. Ask questions. Don't accuse them of being depressed or say, I see that you're depressed, but ask, are you feeling down? Are you feeling overwhelmed? I'm wondering how you're doing. Lead with the empathy and the validation of the emotion. Sounds like things have been really hard. I really recognize that. Offer hope. I'm here to support you. One of the other great, I validate the emotion, shape the behavior. The other one is, and this has been going around a lot with the teens, young adults right now, and the millennials actually, is the 3 H's. Do you want to be hugged, heard, or helped? And I love that. It's a great language that we can use with our kids. Like, do you want to be hugged right now? Like, do you need some just support and love? Do you want to be heard? Like, you just want to vent? Or do you want to be helped? Can I help you with problem solving? And almost always the hugging and the hearing has to come before the helping. People are not ready to go straight to problem solving until they feel really heard and validated. And problem solving also starts with this aspect of hope. I believe that we can work together to help you feel better. And then the very last thing we're going to do is problem solving. And, so a little challenge to yourself to check, like, am I leading these conversations with validation? Am I hugging and hearing before I'm helping? That's a good check for us. If you have a teen that you are worried about being really depressed, meaning you see a lot of those symptoms, you see a lot of that impairment, you have concerns about their safety, you have concerns about their functioning at school or at home, what are some of your options? There are great self-help resources out there. These are particularly true for kids who are still doing their normal activities, still functioning okay. My workbook is one of them. There's lots of others. Use the resources already in your teen's life. So school almost always has some amount of resources, accommodations, referrals in the community. Standard of care for a diagnosable depression episode for a teen is therapy first. So typically an evidence-based treatment like cognitive behavioral therapy that focuses on a lot of the skills we talked about today, but also interpersonal therapy, supportive therapy. That is the first line treatment recommended by the American Psychological Association, the American Medical Association, the CDC, top line treatment. Family therapy can also support, depending on the family circumstances. Medication is also indicated for the treatment of depression. If the teen is under the care of a therapist as well, because of some of the side effects of antidepressant medication for adolescents, and in combination with therapy. So the best outcomes are often therapy and medication, but medication needs to be typically considered in the context of also having someone checking in with them regularly. Depression that is ongoing, that is chronic, that relapses often, or that is associated with repeated self-harm or difficulties keeping your teen safe may require more intensive, so IOPs, intensive outpatient programs, partial hospitalization or residential treatment. If your teen is not able to keep themselves safe at home, then thinking about places in which they can be kept safe while they're learning these skills may be necessary. Um, and whenever possible, the thing about teens, right? If you think about who they are, what is their developmental task? Their developmental task is to become a functioning individual. They are no longer a child and they are not quite an independent adult. And so we also have to support them developmentally in handling their depression while keeping that developmental stage in mind. And that means often they need to be really deeply involved in their treatment planning. They should be choosing their strategies. They should be advocating for themselves whenever possible. If there's a difference of opinion, if they're willing to do something and their idea is a little different than yours, I would typically say let's lead as long as it's feasible with the idea that they have. Um, Give them the choice of therapist, if that's available to you in your community or on your insurance plan, so that they feel some ownership over it. And that's the only way that they're going to learn not only the skills that come with treating their depression, but the ownership for I know how to go get myself help should this happen to me again. And with that, I think we can finish up. If you think your teen would benefit from practicing these skills at home, this is a teen-focused workbook to be used by teens or by therapists or parents working with teens on reversing the spiral of depression, similar organization, strategies for improving mood, strategies for boosting motivation, and then positive psychology strategies for building the life you want. And I will say thank you very much for being here. And then I think we're going to turn it over to questions now.
Well, it is my opportunity to say thank you to you. Honestly, a real pleasure to listen to, and so much good practical information. I'm very excited that we have this. Um, Before we move to the Q&A, I'd like to acknowledge that many youth, even many adults in the US, are struggling. Uncertainty contributes to stress, and unmanaged stress can lead to depression. So please, I'm talking to you, caregivers, make sure that you are taking care of yourself, and then you can be supporting those who are important to you. All right, so if you're able to stay on for the Q&A, awesome. If you are leaving now, please do take our survey. We really want to hear. And we also are going to be giving away that Amazon gift card to one lucky person. There's a poll going on right now. So how confident are you in supporting teens living with depression? You can choose either very confident, confident, somewhat confident, or not confident at all. I'm going to keep moving ahead. Whoops, what did I do? How did that happen? Oh, managed to click on the thing. Okay, good job. All right, so let me extend my appreciation to our funders. We could not do this work without the support of our generous funders and donors. Whoops. Our Youth and Young Adult Mental Wellness Program is funded by the George Harrington Trust, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health Suicide Prevention Program, the Bennett Family Foundation, Thomas Anthony Pappas Charitable Foundation, Rebecca Pomeroy Foundation, and of course, people like you. You already heard my pitch, so please, if you are able to lend some support, we would very much appreciate it. All right. Boy, there we are. According to the poll, it looks like we've done a good job. There is very little comment there as no confident, but a whole lot of people are confident now, better than 50%. 15% are very confident, and 26% are somewhat confident. So yay, you all. Eager to hear how it all works out for you. All right. I am supposed to stop sharing my screen, so there we are. Let's throw in a few questions here and see what we can do. All right. How can a parent resume day-to-day talking if your child has begun to isolate themselves?
Always a tough one. The isolation is like the bane of all of our existence. And sometimes, honestly, it can seem more peaceful. Like, they're in their room being quiet and I can go do my other things. And after years of like the parenting that's so active, sometimes it can feel like a relief. Um, I think a couple things. One, these are sort of around family norms. Like I think this starts with sort of like what is the family expectation around sort of interaction, right? Like do we have a family norm around meal times or a family, day of the week that we're all agree to get together? And if not, maybe we need to create that. Hey, we're at a new stage of life and it's normal that you want to spend more time with your friends or in your room, but it's still important that we keep our family norms. Here are some ideas. Let's brainstorm together what we could commit to, right? And see if you can get from where you are to something that is sustainable, right? So that's setting a smart goal. If like really you guys are spending no dinner times together or no meal times, can we get to one a week, right? Like can we say Sunday night is family dinner? Like we expect that people make a priority of being home and we're going to use that as a check-in. And that means not in your room. So you are actually expected to be there and invite your teen with that. Like, what's one thing? It's not going to be this. Like, the answer is not going to be, and one of my language with my kids was always like, I would love to give you the opportunity to solve this problem. But like if you don't solve it, then I'm going to step in and solve it. So but I'd love to. So I'm creating the space. So we want more family time together. This is where we are. Here's some ideas I have. What's your idea? How could we solve this problem together? Is it once a week? So here's some ideas I have, a 5-minute check-in, like when you get home from school, 5-minute check-in before bed, family dinner at night. Here's some ideas. Which would you like to lead with? And let them offer that possibility. And again, in terms of that goal setting, right? If we're really at like very little interaction, we need to talk about a reasonable goal. It might be as little as 5 minutes. And then the last thing I'll say is like how to have the conversation is as important as what to do in that conversation. So no teen I have ever met likes their parent just barging in their door, being like, we have to talk. I'm sick of you being in your room, right? So we need to, it's some time that is natural, like, and maybe it's a text if that's literally how you're communicating, being like, I need 15 minutes to talk with you about something important in the family. Do you want to talk now? Do you want to talk before bed? Or can we set a time for after school tomorrow? Give them choice, allow them to look ahead to it so they know that the conversation is coming, and then do it at a time when everyone's ready to sit down and have the conversation. So schedule a time, literally, with your teen. Don't do it when you're angry and frustrated. Schedule a time, come with some ideas, invite theirs to get to a resolution. Some ideas I have.
Awesome. You had touched on thoughts of suicide, and someone has asked how to know when to keep talking and when to call 911.
Oh, that's a great question. There's so much history and context dependent here, right? So it really matters a lot. Like, are we talking about a 12 or 13-year-old? Or are we talking about a 17 or 18-year-old? Has there been a suicide attempt or a serious threat in the past or not? I encourage parents to lead from their own concern and get to an agreement of the outcome. One of the ways one of my kids struggled a lot with self-injury and suicidality. And one of the places we got to was when she was really dysregulated or kind of off the rails, was my ability to say, I need to know if you're safe or not. And she could, even if she was yelling it at me, say, I'm safe. And I knew that I could hear it, right? So that we had almost like kind of a code word or a code phrase between us for like, I'm dysregulated, but and I can't pull the trigger 10 times a day. Are you safe? Are you safe? Are you safe? Right. But when I'm really concerned, that she hears that, and it comes from, I'm really concerned and I don't know if you're okay now or if we need to get you more help. Can you help me answer that? Right. because I think it's very rare, honestly, that we're so far gone that we're not able to say to the teen, right now, I'm actually concerned enough about you that I'm thinking of calling 911 to keep you safe. Can you tell me why I shouldn't do that? Right? Can they actually explain to you that they're safe or what they're doing or what they're doing to calm down or what they need? Because if they can't, that's one of your indicators, right? If they can't communicate to you that they can keep themselves safe, that may be the answer that you need. So it's not perfect. I will admit that that is a total problem. I will say it very rarely goes well to just call 911 without your kid knowing this is coming, right? Like I would always try to have the conversation with my kid. And thank you. Someone up here is saying, and I meant to say this, 988, not 911, assuming we keep funding for 988 on the table. But yes, 988 for suicide support, way better. 911 will send the police or someone to your house. I mean, if your kid is physically out of control, that's a great, you get humans in your home that can help. But if you need some help with communicating with your highly distressed or suicidal teen, or you want them to talk to someone, 988 is your strategy.
I was going to get,
Yeah, no, no, no. I saw
wasn't
it
going to
pop
let you,
across the
I wasn't
bottom.
going to let
Thank
you
you. I
move
didn't
without
see
doing
catch
that.
whose name it was, but thank you for putting that in there.
Thank you, very fast typing person.
Yes.
Um, how do you strike a balance between helping teens embrace their feelings without being overcome by them?
Yeah, I mean, I think um so the principle is what I said earlier about the sort of validate the emotion but shape the behavior. And so you know, one strategy is to differentiate, like you're really struggling, you're having a hard time, and what needs to get done, like what is it that we're trying to solve. Often it's the schoolwork. I mean, I would say that's the biggest conflict between parents is, I know you're really, really distressed and you're having an awful day and you have this big assignment due tomorrow or test. How are we going to solve that problem? What do we need to do to get you to getting that problem solved? See if they can generate a solution to that too. But separating out how you're feeling, which is valid, from what we need to do to function in life. And sometimes that gives a little bit of space to be like, I'll get it done, even with the tears and the weeping. And sometimes they do. Or, do we need to work on communicating with your teacher around an extension or what? But what's the behavior we need to do it to solve the item that allows you to experience your emotional experience? So that is a constant balance. And I will also say that, like, when teens can't organize behavior, right? Like when we really are, that is one of our indicators that we need to focus on the depression, right? I think a lot of parents focus so much on the outcomes of it, right? Like you need to get your grades back on track, you need to get back to your activities. But the more and more in which kids can't do those things is more and more our evidence that what we actually just need to focus on is the treatment, right? We need to get your depression solved. Pause school, sports, other things, get you better, and then we'll have to reintegrate. And I'll say this, like, a lot of parents dislike, dedicating the time that it takes to actually treat serious depression in adolescence, right? I don't want to take my kid out of school. I don't want to send them to a treatment program, or I don't have time. They need to stay in their sport or their 6 APs or whatever it is they're doing to go to college, and that's how they'll feel less depressed. And sometimes we can work through it and stay on track with all those goals. But like some kids need the break from all of it to actually just focus on their mental health. And I will tell you, I don't think there's a single one of us over age 40 that knows or cares if someone took an extra 6 months to graduate high school 25 years ago, right? So it feels big now when they're teens, and it will so not feel big later. What will feel big is if they make a suicide attempt, or God forbid they die by suicide, that's what's going to feel big. So sometimes we have to like keep our eye on the ball and know the difference there. Sorry, that went dark a little bit.
Well, it's also the benefit of us having, the broader view, that for,
Adults that only adults can have, that teens
right,
cannot.
and that you had mentioned that, it's them, it's now, so
But we get sucked into it, I think, with our teens, like, right? They have to stay in these classes and stay in there because they got to go to college and they got, right? We get on the hamster wheel with them, and we really have to be willing to get off the hamster wheel sometimes, I think, when it gets serious. So.
Right, this is a smaller hamster wheel, I think.
Okay.
But should a parent let their kids drop out of sports when they're going through depression?
Um, I'm so like, am I really expected to say a yes or a no? I mean, they're sort of like, it depends,
What are the
right?
factors that would help them decide?
Yeah, what are the factors that would help them decide? I mean, I think um what I would talk about like reactivity to current stress versus planfully making a change that sustains my life better, right? There's a difference between a kid who's been like, 15-hour a week competitive athlete and is now in high school and should have the opportunity to say my goals and priorities have shifted. And so maybe I want to drop from my like super competitive team to a more recreation or school focused team. So like I think the conversation needs to be around not just yes or no, the extracurricular and the sport, but what is the activity doing for you? How is that aligned with your goals? And is it aligned with your goals? Like, is your goal around, physical health? Is your goal around building the college resume? Is your goal around peer interaction? Because sometimes we can get the goal met while giving up something that also adds stress. And so I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer about one activity as much as how are we helping model for the kid a life that is sustainable, balanced, and aligned with their goals? And is that then decision? And then I think that especially the older they get, there is some healthy conversation around what commitment have you made to teammates or other people? And as you become a more maturing person, how do you balance other people's needs or commitments you've made with your own mental health needs? And where are we on that, right? There are absolutely times when the number one thing needs to be your own mental health or your kids' mental health. And there are times on the border where you're like, would it be the right thing to do to wait until the end of the season, right? Or the end of this tournament coming up or something so that you're not leaving people you care about in the lurch? Are we also learning good skills for communicating with other people when we want to make a change? So there's a lot of factors there, but I would definitely say put it on the table. But I'm full of my sayings today, but like my other favorite saying is wherever you go, there you are, right? So like your kid is the same kid, whether or not they are in that activity or not. Very rarely does changing the environment change the underlying causes of depression. The underlying causes of depression are how we manage stress, how we think, how we communicate, how we seek social support. And so typically it is not just one thing like outside of us causing our depression. If we just fix that, right? If we just get that kid out of their lives or change that teacher or change schools. And we want so much to have a quick fix, but so I would just be cautious about that, right? Like where does that sit in the other things that we're trying to teach that kid? So
Right, I think we
yes
have
and no
time
and
for.
maybe.
Hmm?
Yes and no and maybe is my
There you
answer.
go. And all at the same time. Um, I think we can fit one more in, and I
Okay.
think it's something that a lot of people deal with. How can we help support a teen with depressive symptoms who is not willing to go to therapy?
Oh, big one. So it's an ongoing conversation, right? And here's what we don't want because teens are developmentally seeking independence. How do we seek independence? We separate from other people and we do that by being different, right? So we know this, like mom says the sky is blue. No, by definition, the sky is red. Like because like this is how I'm asserting that I have my own thoughts and my own feelings, my own behaviors. So the way to not do it is to come in and be like, you're depressed and you need help, and this is what we're going to do. So how do we do it a different way? Well, I think some of it is around the partnering, right? So how can we have a shared language about what the kid is experiencing? Does the kid believe they are struggling? What does the kid want different in their life? What are the kids' ideas about what to do, right? So what does the kid think they need, right? So can we agree you're not feeling great and your grades are struggling? Can we agree that we'd like to get your grades back on track? Okay. What's your idea for how to do that? Leave me alone. I've been leaving you alone, but like, is that your way of saying you're going to get your grades back on track? Yes, I'm on top of it. Okay. How about this? We'll give it a week to try it your way. Let's look at right now where you are. And in a week, if things are a little bit back on track, we'll say that your strategy is working. If not, we need to try something from my list of strategies and you can choose it. So I'm always willing to let the kids solve the problem their way first, as long as we agree on what the evidence would be, right? And if we agree on that, then we can agree if they don't make it. And then we can start with, and then, so that's the first one, let them try it their way, agree on the terms. If and when it's not successful, have a list. Here are 3 things we could do. Which one are you willing to try for 2 weeks? And they can choose from there. So as much autonomy, as much choice bringing along with is always going to be the best.
All right, and I'm very sorry that we couldn't get to all of the questions. There may be some that we answer in other ways, so stay tuned, people. But we have come to the end of the webinar. I would, of course, like to express my grateful appreciation to Dr. Mezulis and to all of you who have taken the time to learn something. And I think that everyone's going to walk away with something new they can try and some good perspective on how we can be us and help them be them. So thank you all so much. Please do complete the survey and visit us at familyware.org. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.